I'm a big fan of St. Petersburg, huge fan of St. Petersburg. I've been here many times before. The first time I was here actually was when it was still Leningrad. But I remember distinctly coming here to a BA type of an atmosphere, a bachelor's degree, which you start off with and then go on to bigger programs. But I did my undergraduate work in the United States at a place called Furman University, or as they say in South Carolina, it's Furman University. And so I sort of say that I'm Finnish by birth and Southern by the grace of God. When I was at Furman University for my first week, in 1989, in September, and I thought I had come to the epitome of liberal arts education and open-minded. And we stayed in a dormitory, as you often do in American universities in the beginning. We ended up in conversation in the dorms, and there was a guy who I later found out was right up Jimmy's gun, really conservative. And I was sort of defending perestroika and glasnost in the Soviet Union at the time, saying, listen, I'm optimistic, things are changing. And he looked at me and said, Alex, you don't understand. The Soviet Union is the evil empire, and Gorbachev is Antichrist. Well, Jesus Christ. Is this what I call a liberal arts education? Now, I'd really like to see that guy again. I haven't sort of Googled him or anything like that, but I'm sure he'd be quite surprised about things have changed. Now, I thought what I'd do, we have about 45 minutes or so. I'd like to present to you 3 points for discussion, or 3 theses. I'll do that in about 15 minutes, and then we'll go from there to a Q&A in about half an hour, if that's okay with all of you. Now, the 3 observations I want to give you to you today. First one, I'll give you 4 key dates, which I think have changed world politics in the past, I'd say 20 years, or almost 20 years. Second, I'll explain to you what I think will be the post-American world, which we'll be entering after the American elections. And then thirdly, I'd like to say a few words on where I think that the relationship between the EU and Russia will be going in the near future. Now, the first one, 4 key dates. I think that if we look at my sort of political consciousness, or the time that I've been a student of international relations, because I don't think you ever leave that mode. Even if you're a foreign minister, you always end up being an observer. Perhaps a bit more timely than someone who's working on game theory or whatever. But you're always a student. And in the time that I've been a student of international relations, I think there have been 4 key dates. The first one was, of course, November 1989, the fall of the Berlin Wall. Why was that a key date? Well, that was when many people thought that we faced the end of history. You remember the Fukuyama thesis that here everyone in the world is going to start loving liberal democracy and a social market economy. Goodbye authoritarian communist regimes, goodbye socialist economic theory, goodbye Marx, if you will. So I think that was a key date in many ways for all of us. The second key date, because that started the thinking that the only thing that can exist is liberal democracy and market economy. Of course, we've been proven wrong, but I'll come to that in a second. The second key date is, of course, 9/11, because that's when we started the new foreign policy doctrine of we have to fight rogue states, we have to fight terrorism, no matter what it takes. We can go ahead and force democracy wherever in the world we want to do. And of course, Iraq, I think, is a case in point. Afghanistan to a certain extent, but a completely different ballgame. So 9/11. Then the third key date for me was what I call 08. In other words, the war and the crisis in Georgia. For me personally, of course, it was a very big thing because I was very involved personally as a chairman of an organization called the OSCE, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. And I had the chance to fly into Tbilisi 3 days into the war, get Shabbos to sign a 4-point ceasefire agreement, which was then changed later on by the French president in Moscow to a 6-point plan. Why do I say this was a change in world politics? Well, I say it because a lot of us had focused on what I would call new threats. Climate change, terrorism, quick immigration moves, diseases. These were sort of the focus of world politics at the time. A lot of people had left behind the possibility of the use of force. Just in parentheses, I think it was actually a war that no one wanted. And I think there's been way too much blame game going on about it. I'll end the parentheses on that, we can ask about it if you so decide. But nevertheless, it was a change when you saw that, well, traditional warfare can be brought back into the borders of Europe, which we hadn't seen. Yeah, to a certain extent in the Western Balkans, but in a different kind of a way. So in that sense, it was a change. And a change for the worse, I'd say. You know, it was a time when relations between the East and the West cooled down. But, fortunately, there's a fourth date. Same as fortunately in the business school. What is it? The financial crisis. I think the financial crisis is great. Why do I think it's great? I think it's great, first of all, because it's a bit of an adjustment to the world economy, which was needed. But secondly, because I think it just shows how interdependent the world economy and the world is today. So my whole philosophy is very much a European integration philosophy, which goes with economy first and politics following it. What do I mean by this? If we realize that we live in an economically interdependent world, whether it's financial dependence through the markets, whether it's a dependence on services, goods, free movement of people, whatever, it is a dependence. And I think that the traditional West quickly realized that the traditional East is kind of interlinked, and this happened from the other side as well. So the rhetoric after Georgia, I think, toned down a little bit, and we realized that we're all in this boat together. Of course, if the Moscow stock markets comes down to 73%, it's kind of a harsh realization. And if foreign investment goes out, then there's a complete new division of finance and money in the country. If there are a whole bunch of oligarchs that are going to go down because of this, so be it. But I do think that this is going to be a key change. So these 4 dates I would put in my sort of international relations conscious lifetime, 20 years, the key ones. The downfall of the Berlin Wall, 9/11, 08, and then the financial crisis. So, cliche, we're living in interesting times, which is kind of nice for someone who's a European buff, who's been only focusing on institutional questions for the past 10 years. Now, second observation, I think that we are moving towards what I call, or let me correct, what Fareed Zacharias, editor-in-chief of Newsweek, calls a post-American world. I think after the Cold War, we lived in a world where there was only one real superpower, or one undisputed superpower, and that undisputed superpower was the United States. There were entities such as the European Union which could be considered to be a superpower in trade or in aid, but not in the traditional political sense in foreign and security policy. Now I think we're moving more towards a world which is what I would call multipolar. So you have an emergence of the others. Who are the others? First and foremost, I'd say the European Union. People forget this, that the European Union is the biggest economy in the world. It is the biggest single market in the world. It is the biggest trading power in the world, bigger than the United States,